I have to admit, the first time I considered this idea, I immediately dismissed it. I mean, Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns weren't interacting with one another for who knows how many years. It could be many decades, it could even be centuries. The very thought of Sunny's mother being a unicorn seems rather ludicrous at first glance. But this idea just kept coming back into my mind, and I began thinking about Argyle's research. Exactly how all of these artifacts ended up in his possession is really anyone's guess at this point. It's entirely possible that his family had been passing them down from generation to generation, which could also explain how Argyle seems to have knowledge of the main six when no one else seems to. But there's also the possibility that before Sunny was born, Argyle himself had been traversing the world in search of these artifacts. Clues about Equestria's ancient past which would help him to understand why the three pony races had separated from one another. He might have even been the first Earth pony to leave Maritime Bay since its founding. But having grown up with the very same propaganda that everyone else had been exposed to among the Earth ponies, would he have had the same prejudiced outlook that Phyllis did at some point in his youth? Would discovering these pieces of Equestria's past been the spark which showed him a new perspective on unicorns and Pegasi? Or was he not the only pony who had decided to leave their home to seek out understanding of the past? The very idea that not a single unicorn or Pegasus would have felt just as curious as Argyle seems to be a bit of a stretch. And wouldn't it have made a more interesting story if, instead of Argyle learning to put aside prejudices through reading ancient texts, he happened to meet a unicorn whilst out on his travels? Perhaps the two of them wanted to search out the same artifacts and needed to rely on one another to navigate some ancient traps, forming a bond through their struggles. And the reason why I bring this up is not just because Argyle seems to be the only one who believed that unicorns and Pegasi weren't evil, but also because he seems to have an almost opposite color scheme compared to his daughter Sunny. But he does have a much closer color scheme to a particularly cheery unicorn. In fact, one of the pieces of early concept art showed that Argyle used to have a color scheme much closer to Sunny's. You have to wonder why they changed it. Now that by itself really shouldn't mean much, because after all, there are tons of ponies in G5 that have similar looking color schemes to Argyle. But consider for a moment how every other unicorn in Bridalwood had lost all passion for life, moping around in a daze at all times due to the loss of their magic. Except for Izzy. Now, why is it that she was able to keep her cheerful attitude when the rest of her village had become so discouraged? It could certainly be because of the personality she was born with. Or, and I know this is a stretch which may only have a place in fanfiction if we're being honest here, but what if Izzy's father was Argyle? What if Sunny's mother was a unicorn? And knowing that every Earth pony would reject the presence of a unicorn foal, and every unicorn would have rejected the presence of an Earth pony foal, the decision had been made that they'd have to separate. It is a radical idea, perhaps something that the MLP staff would never even consider. But for whatever reason, this idea just kept popping back in my mind. And you know what? I think I'd kind of enjoy a sort of parallel with the Royal Sisters from the Friendship is Magic series. Sunny, Star Scout, taking on the role of Celestia, and Izzy Moonbow taking on the role of Luna. Anyone out there in the fanfiction community who'd be interested in running with this idea in a story? In the meantime, though, I'd very much like to hear from each of you. Do any of these elements seem possible for G5? Or are they just too fantastical for the series to come? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because as always, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.